Yashakoyach for having me come share the Torah. It's a big schus for me to be a nitful loise mitzvah to chaver loim the Torah, that devote the time at night for limud Torah. Oiskim b'dvar Hashem zu halacha. Aleichem hakos avoyim bochus Hashem, kolabdei Hashem, ha'oimdim b'beis Hashem ba'leilos. To utilize the nights, na'avodas Hashem, limud Torah. So it's a privilege to be here and handle the sugya of Kibud Aveim. I was in Eretz Yisrael last summer, and I gave my sefer to a choshev Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael, and he opens it up. So there's a lot in there, and he tells me, "No, could you tell me the biggest chiddush in the whole sefer?" I said, "The biggest chiddush in the sefer is that there's a mitzvah called Kibud Aveim." He understood it. We all know there's a mitzvah that exists, but to take that mitzvah, mikoyach lapoyel, to really apply the mitzvah, it's not something that everyone thinks about. It's not in our minds. We don't have the awareness. And the more you delve into the sugyas, the more you learn the sugyas, the more you get an awareness of it, and it brings lidei maisa. You know, if you stop a 15-year-old bacher, you see him, his mother asks him to do something, a chore, and he doesn't want to do it, and he gets annoyed, and he starts screaming at his mother. If you were to pull him over and say, Yankee, I don't understand, are you allowed to scream at your mother? That's Kibud Aveim? It's hardly imaginable that he would say, yeah, that's not a problem. That's not a violation of Kibud Aveim. Everyone understands that you're not allowed to do that. So why did he do it? Because he didn't think about it. It was like, oh, I'll die to you. That's not the way he's noihig. So Memele, the mitzvah Kibud is a mitzvah that requires a lot of attention. And Rabbi Salanta writes in a letter that the best way to be oiker midara, or to be mashur shemida toive, is by learning the mitzvah, learning the sugyas be'iyun. Not just learning it, but really going through it properly, because that brings awareness, that brings the hirus, and yirotzain, the kasher zechinu, l'sad eroitza keniskel asoisa, which bezeicha to be mekayim this mitzvah, bezeicha to that tochas atoy leman yarichun yomechu. I want to speak about a shaila tonight that's relevant. It's quite motzoi, and that is elder care. A lot of people have parents of age that the parents get older and they're no longer capable of living by themselves. They need assistance. And the shaila is, what exactly is a son or daughter's responsibility? Versteht sich, there's two options. You could put an elderly parent into an old age home, an assisted living or a nursing home. Or you could take him into your own home and do the mitzvah Kibud Aveim. And before I get into the shaila that studim, I want to be makdim an incredible insight from Rabbi Leib Steinman. Rabbi Leib asked, why is it that in recent times people are zoiche tariches yomim that we didn't find in previous generations? A century ago, it was very unusual for a person to live to 80, 85, 90 was come out unheard of. And Baruch Hashem, in the past generation or so, we see people, lots of people living deep into the 80s, into the 90s. We hear of many people living past 100. Why is it that punct now we have people living so much longer than they did in previous generations? Now, of course, if you ask a random person on the street this shaila, he'll tell you, of course, today we have tremendous advancement in medicine, advancement technology, we have machines and testing we never had in the past, we have medications and research we never had in the past, labs. So of course, we have all the tools and skills that we need to extend a person's life and have arichos yom. That's how a poshet person would think. Listen to how Rabbi Leib understood it. Rabbi Leib said, because Chazal tell us that the schus of Esav to be existing in this golus over Klal Yisrael is the schus of Kibud that Esav had. Esav has his chus of Kibud Av, and that is his chus that keeps him through the Golus until Mashiach is going to come. Klal Yisrael is right now in Golus Edom. Golus Yishmael is a chelik of Golus Edom. We all feel the Golus Yishmael today. But it's a chelik of Golus Edom. And Golus Edom, in order to get out of Golus Edom, we have to overpower the koyach of Edom. And that was the power of Kibud Av. The Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz writes that the reason why Esther, Hamalke, was the one that was chosen for the Hatzolah for Klal Yisrael was because Esther was Ein Lo Av Va'em. She didn't have a father or mother. She never violated the mitzvah of Kibud Av Va'em. And Memela, she had that schus that she was able to be Matzah Klal Yisrael. Says Rabbi Leib, in order for Klal Yisrael to be Zoichet to the Geula, we need this schus of Kibud Av Va'em. We need it by Klal Yisrael to overpower the Koyach of Esav. So the Eibishter made it that Besoif HaGolus, Be'ikvis the Mashiach, we're going to have more opportunity to do Kibud Av Va'em. HaKadosh Baruch Hu granted old parents long years, old age, to have more years, more opportunity to be able to do the mitzvah Kibud Av Va'em, and with that we'll have the schus to be Zoichet to Geula. So Kibud Av Va'em on the one hand is a very difficult mitzvah. It's time consuming, it's taxing and challenging. On the other hand, it's from the greatest mitzvahs. The Yishalmi calls it min achamuris sheba chamuros. And we need that for the schus for Geula, and that's why we have so many opportunities today to fulfill this mitzvah Kibud Av Va'em. So getting back to the Shaila, elderly parents that are no longer capable of living by themselves, and they need assistance. And shtei drochim lefanenu, there's two drochim, there's two options. A child could say, it's a big burden to take a parent into the home. Let's enroll him in an old age home. That's the easy way out. Midach Gisa, sometimes the child says, Fakert, no, I don't want my parent in an old age home. I want to bring him to the house. I want the mitzvah Kibud Av Va'em. I want all those mitzvahs. Chacham levi kach mitzvahs. So what's the right mahalach? So, of course,
Any said that before you should think about not taking them into the house because you don't want to be about to Kibud Av Va'em.
What do you mean by that?
You don't want to be over any.
You don't want to be over. Oh, okay, so that's very important to Ara. Mitzvah will discuss that. But in the Etzem Shaila, the first thing that has to be in his bar is really the Metzias before we get to the Halachim. Every circumstance and situation is different. And there's sometimes that it's better for the parent to be in a nursing home. Sometimes you have a child that says, no, I don't want him in the nursing home. I want the mitzvah Kibud Av Va'em. But if it's best for the parent to be in the nursing home, he needs that level of care, something that the child cannot provide in his own home perhaps. So then you have to do what's best for the parent. That is the mitzvah Kibud Av, to do what's best for the parent. Very often, a parent will get much better care if he'll be in a child's home, personal attention, not in a facility. So the first thing has to be in his bar, what is the mitzias of the parent's condition and the child's capabilities to attend to the parent's necessities. So after we're mavar the mitzias, if of course it's important for the parent to be enrolled in an institution, that's what has to be done, and that's what the mitzvah would tell us. As much as you want to bring the parent into your own home, you have to do what's best for the parent. But I want to discuss tonight the more complex shaila, and that is when it might be best for the parent to be in a child's home and not in an institution, but the child he's not ready to take on the burden, the oil of assisting a parent in his own home. Is he mechuyiv to take the parent in if that's better for him? Is the mitzvah of Kibud Av Va'em mechayiv that he has to take his parent into his own home? That's shaila number one. And shaila number two, if he's not mechuyiv, or if he chooses not to, who has to pay for the expenses of the assisted living? Is that the child's achrayus, or is that the parent's achrayus? Is Kibud Av mechayiv that the child should pay for it, or that's not the child's responsibility, that's the parent's responsibility? Now, I'm sure the Olam is familiar with the sugya of Kibud Av Mishalav. There's machloikis in the Gemara, if Kibud Av Mishal Lav or Kibud Av Mishal Ben. That means one man damar holds that a child is mechuyev to honor his parents, assist his parents, help them, but he's not mechuyev to spend money on the mitzvah of Kibud Av. So if a father says to his son, please go to the grocery store and pick up a bottle of milk for me, the child has to pick up the bottle of milk, but he doesn't have to pay for the milk. The father has to pay for it. Kibud Av Mishal Lav, that's one man Omar. One man Omar says Kibud Av Mishal Ben. Part of the mitzvahs, you have a chiyuv lulav and esrog, you have to pay for lulav and esrog. A person can't say, well, I'm ready to take a lulav and esrog if somebody gives me a free lulav and esrog. The mitzvah is mechayev you to pay for the lulav and esrog. So over here, the mitzvah is to buy a bottle of milk, so the mitzvah is mechayev you to pay for the bottle of milk. Kibud Av Mishal Ben. We paskin Kibud Av Mishal Lav. It's halacha psukin, the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, Kibud Av Mishal Lav. That the haitzos, the expenses of Kibud Av come from the father, not from the son. So although he's mechayev to be metapel and help the father or mother, he's not mechuyev to spend money on the mitzvah. So l'chayra would be pashut that if the child chooses to send the father to the nursing home, it's Kibud Av Mishal Lav, so he could come visit the nursing home, but he doesn't have to pay for it. What? So that's a very important shaila that Mitzvah will speak about. So, in truth it's not so simple like that. There was a famous ma'aseh that's brought down in many svarim with Rabbi Chaim Brisker. There are different variations of the story, but I'll say one variation of the story, but the yesod from all the variations is the same yesod. That there was a younger man that got a telegram that his father is in the hospital in Varsha, and the father requests that his son come to visit him. So this younger man came to Rabbi Chaim and said, I'm prepared to take the time out to go visit my father in the hospital, but a train ticket from here to Varsha costs money. Kibud Av Mishal Lav. So I'm ready to do the mitzvah, but my father should have to pay for it. If he sends me a train ticket, I'll come. If he doesn't send a train ticket, that's not my chiyuv to pay for the train ticket. And Rabbi Chaim told this young man, you're absolutely right. You don't have to pay for the train ticket. Go by foot. Start walking. You have to walk. You want to take a train because you're lazy. It's inconvenient to walk. You don't want to walk for several hours. There was actually, it's not clear where this ma'aseh took place, assuming that it took place in the city of Brisk. From Brisk to Varsha is a few days by foot. So Rabbi Goldstein has a mimer. He was asked how much a person is mechuyev to extend himself to do a mitzvah. How far do you have to go? If there's a lulav and esrog, there's no lulav and esrog in the whole state of New York, you're going to have to travel, mamish travel to California to buy a lulav and esrog. Would you be mechuyev to travel to California to buy a lulav and esrog? You say, I'm an honest. There's no lulav and esrog available in New York. Rabbi Goldstein has a whole mimer. He brings this ma'aseh ben hadvarim, and he comes out after many riots. Yes, absolutely. There's no shiur how much you're mechuyev to go for a mitzvah. You're mechuyev to do it. You got to do whatever you could to do it. Whatever is biyachol, whatever you're able to do to be able to make high in the mitzvah. So Reb Chaim told this young man, go by foot, don't go by train. What Reb Chaim was telling this young man is a moedik yesod. What Reb Chaim was saying is true Kibud Av Mishal Lav. But the expenses that are for the convenience of the son, that's not Kibud Av Mishal Lav. That's for yourself. That's not for your father. You're doing it to make it more convenient for yourself. L'mashal, let's say there's two ways you want to go visit your father that lives out of town. You could take the highway that's going to have tolls, bridges and tunnels, or you could take the roundabout route that's going to take double the amount of time, but there's no tolls. So if you say Kibud Av Mishal Lav, so you say, okay, I'm happy to visit you, pay for the tolls, maybe the gas, we'll speak about the gas in a moment. But the tolls, what about the tolls? So no, you can take the longer roundabout way. It'll take you 4 hours instead of 2 hours, but that's your achrayus. You want the convenience of getting there quicker. That's your own pocket. That's not for your father. Now, what about the gas, derech hagav? Rav Moshe Sternbuch says that even though we pass in Kibud Av Mishal Lav, but that all means to say that you're not mechuyev to spend more for your father than you would spend for a regular person. If a random person would come to you and say, could you go to the grocery and get me a bottle of milk? If you're a Baal Chesed, maybe you'll be matriach yourself and go for him. but you're not going to pay for it. Maybe if he's an ani, maybe you would, but stam, you give me the money, I'll go for you. So any expense that you wouldn't do for a regular person, so you don't have to do for your father, mitzad the mitzvah of kibud av mishalav. But if an expense, Lamashal handles something that's a little outdated, if you write a letter and you have to pay for the stamp, Moshe Shembel says, if you'd write a friend a letter, you're going to tell your friend, I'll write you a letter if you pay for the stamp. Not. Of course, you know that's normal. You pay for the stamp. You send somebody a letter. So if you want to send your parents a letter, they want you to write home, write a letter, pay for the stamp. I'm assuming that it's reasonable to say that, if you wanted to go visit your friend, you wouldn't think about who's going to pay for the gas. So, true. It's true. Everything's, has to be with the cheshbon. But derech klal, if you're not driving too far, the gas is not such a cheshbon, who's going to pay for the gas, then l'chayr that would also go into the same shaila, and we wouldn't say that the father would be mechuyev to pay for the gas. The what? Can you?
Go straight to the Meiser of Chaim Brisker and say that he should walk. Anyway, it's pay the gas.
You're right. You could say that.
The father says, I want to see you today.
So if the father says, I want to see you today, then you say, the only way I could see you today is if if I get a train ticket or a plane, or if I pay for the bridges and tunnels. So if you help out with the expenses, I'll be happy to come and visit. But if he doesn't give a date when he wants to see you, he says, please come visit. So if it's going to take you extra time, that's on the son. The what?
No, because Mr. Shias asked
Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah. What about tefillah? What about tefillah b'tzibur? You're going to be walking for 3 days. The no minyanim. The teretz is, we know oisip mitzvah, potem mitzvah. Somebody's walking to do kibud. He's oisip mitzvah for 3 days straight. He's oisip mitzvah, half of a fellow. So the Pischei Tshuva brings off a note that Talmud Torah is godel. That's pshat is if you're not in the city, if you want to leave the city, but oifin that if I leave the city, I won't be able to do kibud of aim. So on that, Talmud Torah is better to leave the city, learn Torah, and don't do kibud of aim. But when you have a tziva or kibud of aim, you can't pat yourself with Talmud Torah. Every bacher loves to go to the Bais Medrash Friday afternoon when his mother needs his help. Friday night, Shabbos day, Shanat. Friday afternoon when his mother needs his help, and he pulls out Talmud Torah card, right? Talmud Torah can get kulam. And go to Talmud Torah, Yitzim Kibud of aim. So that's true, but not when you have a tzivui. When you have a tzivui, when it's already chal on you, your parent asks you to do something, there's no Torah Talmud Torah. So you have a Torah Talmud Torah that you could go learn, but often that your parents can't ask you to do something. You won't be there for them to ask you. But if you were there and you had the tzivui to do it, then you're mechuyev to do it. So if you're traveling for 3 days to visit your father, you take a potter from tefillah b'tzibur, you're ois b'mitzvah, potter min mitzvah.
And let's say when parents come to visit, like when you even at straw, walk around like that and stuff, so it's the same level, it gets to the level of tzivui.
If the parents come to him, so yeah. And a chanami. So Rabbi said, let's get back to our 2 shailas that we started this evening. If a parent needs assistance, and there's 2 options. One is to bring the parent into the child's home, or the second option would be to enroll him in an old age home. So the second shaila was that if he goes to an old age home, whose chiyuv is that to pay for the expenses? So we said, Pash, just kibud av mishalav. But Lafidus Yisoid from Reb Chaim, which by the way, the place can go with this Reb Chaim, and not just the Maise. Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank and the Tshuva and others go with this lahaloch lamaise, that any expense that's for the convenience of the son, that's on the son, that's not mishalav. So it comes out like this. If these 2 shailas are really mitla toli bedadi, the toli zebuzeh, if the son is mechuyev to bring his father into his own home, if kibud av is mechayev that, so now the son wants to, for his own convenience, he doesn't want the oil of being metapel with his father, he's going to put him in the old age home. So it comes out that the expense of the old age home is for the son's convenience, to get him off the hook of himself being metapel with the father. Then we don't say kibud av mishalav. Then the son, if he decides to enroll the father in an old age home, the son has to pay for it. Because really the son's mechuyev to bring him to his own home. There wouldn't be any expense. Narvas, the son doesn't want the people, he doesn't want the oil, or it cannot do the oil, whatever it may be. So then for the son's convenience, he's mechuyev to pay for that convenience. Okay, that's a very good question. So we're going to discuss that. This leads us to the first shaila. So now we realize that the second Shiur is totally in the first Shiur. So we have to clarify the first Shiur. Is a son mechuyev to bring a parent into his own home and be metapel with the parent? Is the mitzvah of Kibud Av mechayev such an oifin to such an extent that a child has to exert himself and put himself out to that extent? So that's really what we have to discuss, and Mamela will be able to be poished our Shiloh. Now, we know there's a halacha psuke in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Tov Reish Nun Vav. This is a general rule by all mitzvahs. Hamevazvez al yevazvez yoyse mechoimish. A person is not mechuyev to spend more than a choimish menachosov on a mitzvah, any mitzvah saseh. There are a few exceptions to the rule, Dalad Kaisis, Ner Chanukah, but generally speaking, a person is not mechuyev to spend more than a choimish menachosov for a mitzvah. If a person only has $100 to his name, and now it's Erev Sukkos, he has to buy a lulav and esrog, he's mechuyev to spend up to $20. More than $20 is not mechuyev. Al yivazvez yoyse mechoimish. What about for the mitzvah of Kibud Av? How much is a person mechuyev to spend for Kibud Av? And the answer is nothing. Right? Kibud Av mishal av. If we think about it, l'chor it's a pliya. If a regular mitzvah, a person is mechuyev to spend a choimish menachosov, and now you have Kibud Av, which the Yishalmi says chamuris menachamuros, and that you're not mechuyev to spend even a penny? How do we understand that? No, where's the pshat?
Did you have to pay for Bittul Malach?
Bittul melachim. So
Even if you're gonna get to the matzah, you have to be psucha.
It's not on the mitzvah.
the what?
The money is on the mitzvah.
Oh, so the Chazoinish says a word that Kibud does not translate into money. Spending money is not being machabit. Kibud is a ma'isa of Kibud. Putting yourself out, helping be meshamish, malbishoy, machiloi, mashkeyu, machnisoi, meitzioi. Those are actions of Kibud. Spending money on a parent is not Kibud. And therefore, the fact that there's money involved in the expense of the Kibud, that's not part of the etzem mitzvah of Kibud. That's a hechetimtzah how to do the Kibud. But the Kibud itself has no shaykhs to the etzem expense involved. That's not being machabed the father. And therefore, you're not mechuyev to spend money for the mitzvah of Kibud. Azoi shteit nechazoinish. But my shail is like this. There's the aside from the poiskim that the shiur of choimish is not only limited to money. If somebody would have a tremendous tircha or tsar that would be equal to choimish menachasov, the Abnei Nezer has a tshuva. If a person's mechuyev after 10 years, he was married for 10 years and didn't have any children, he's mechuyev to be megarish his wife or marry an additional wife, the Mishnah says in Yivamis, because there's a mitzvah puravu. So Abnei Nezer has a shaila that nowadays, where we don't have the option to marry another wife, it could be not mechuyev to divorce your wife, because that's giving up for the mitzvah of puravu more than a chaimish menachosov. The megarish ishtoi is the what you're giving up. The megarish ishtoi, that means more to a person than a chaimish menachosov. And if the person is not mechuyev to spend more than a chaimish menachosov on a mitzvah, so it's not limited only to money. That means a person doesn't have to be mitzayir himself or compromise or sacrifice more than what's worth a chaimish to him for a mitzvah. So memele, hu adin, it's lav dafka when it comes to money for any tsar or tirchim. So efshis coming clarin, what about by Kibud Aveim? If a child will take a parent into his house, and the oil, the burden, the tircha, and the tirza of taking care of a parent would translate into more than a chaimish menachasov, is the mitzvah mechayiv that much? Is there a shiur chaimish by Kibud Aveim? Or maybe there's no shiur chaimish? How far does a child have to exert himself for the mitzvah? There's a machloikis hapoiskim. We know that by various mitzvahs, there's a p'tur of zokin be'ena lefi chvoidei. If somebody is walking down the street and he sees a metzia on the floor, and it's embarrassing for him to pick it up and walk around with it, Zaken ben fichvayda. What exactly the type of zaken fichvayda? It means in usher, means a tam chacham. It's machlokes. But whatever the zaken fichvayda is there a p'tor zaken ben fichvayda by kibud avim? The father or mother asks the child to do something that's mamish a big bizoyin for the child to do it. Is there a p'tor zaken ben fichvayda? I can't do this. Huh? You can't respond. You can't answer back. But and over there, the father's mavaza you. There's nothing you could do other than just retaliate. But over here, if the father asks you to do a shimush, I need help with something. Imagine the father was a soda bottle collector, and he asks you to, I need help pushing the big shopping cart full of soda cans. You're going to push that in the street. It's very embarrassing. Are you mechuyev to do it? Some poskim say, "Zachem lefichvayday."
It's worth more than a famous.
The what?
It's worth more than a famous. You'll pay more than a famous not to do that.
So that's part of the shaila. Very good. That's mamish the shaila. Is there a shiur of chaimish by kibud av? Pashtus, this shaila should be totally in the famous hakir of the minchas chinuch. The minchas chinuch. Bavos minchas chinuch is kiba of a mitzvah ben adam lachaveiroi or a mitzvah ben adam lamakim. Because the Torah of zaken ben fichvayda is generally by mitzvahs ben adam lachaveiroi. Hashavas avei the other mitzvahs chaheina. But by ben adam lamakim we don't find the Torah of zaken ben fichvayda. So pashtus we could say that the shaila should be totally in that chakir of the minchas chinuch. If the mitzvah kibud av is ben adam lachaveiroi, so by ben adam lachaveiroi, so zaken ben is potter. If we say it's bein adam lamakim, there's no Torah bein adam lamakim by zaken ben fichvayda. I call makim in eighth bein chacham and v'unda neged Hashem. So there's no Torah of zaken ben fichvayda by bein adam lamakim. The shita mukubetzis and bometzia daf lamed beis says mefurish that kibud av is a mitzvah d'mamayna. It's bein adam lachaveiroi. And the shita, very same shtickle in the shita says there's no Torah bein fichvayda by kibud av. How are you talking? So there's a sefer on Yeridei Chad Ridei. He says that even if you say kibud av is ben adam lachaveiroi, because kibud av is so chomer hukash kvoidim l'chvoid hamakom. So just like by kvoid hamakom there's no Torah zaken ben fichvayda, so to by kibud av there's no Torah zaken ben fichvayda. So it comes out to the most poskim taki go with this that there's no Torah zaken ben fichvayda by kibud av. And even if it's embarrassing, but that's part of the mitzvah. That's what the mitzvah is machayiv you. Zeu kvoidai. Like says in the Shulchan Aruch by Hachon l'Shabbos, a person shouldn't say it's not v'lifoidai. Zeu kvoidai. My Shaver used to say when people come with on the Shiloh on Shabbos, they got a big stain on their suit on Shabbos, and they want to know how they could clean it up. It's embarrassing to walk around with a big stain on the suit on Shabbos. My Shaver would say that's your badge of honor. By having that stain, you're showing that you're keeping Shabbos. You're showing Shabbos. So what we might think is enfich kvoida verkehrt, zeu kvoida. That's the covet. There's a halach in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Mem Sif Hey that discusses the halach of kibud av mishalav, and the Machaber says v'im ein la'avi yesh leben. What happens if the father does not have money and the son does have money? Then we force the son to be zon is aviv from the son's pocket. Even though kibud av mishalav, that's if the father has money. If the father doesn't have money, then the son's mechuyev from his own money. V'im ein leben. What happens if the son also doesn't have money? Einoi chayiv lachzer al psachim. You're not mechuyev to go around collecting lahachlas aviv to feed your father. The simple reading of the Shulchan Aruch sounds like that a child is not mechuyev to go schnorring for his father. That much not mechuyev to do. You don't have to go schnorring. Says the Chazoin Ish on this halach in Shulchan Aruch. When the Machaber says, "Im ein leben eino chayv lechazer lapsochim lahach loviv," the Machaber doesn't mean you're not mechuyev to collect for your father. What the Machaber means to say is that if you don't have enough money for yourself and for your father, you're not mechuyev to collect for yourself and give what you have to your father. That you're not mechuyev to do. If the son only has enough money for either himself to buy lunch or for his father to buy lunch, the son could buy himself lunch. His father doesn't have lunch. Now the son's going to be mechuyev to go collecting for his father. So when the Mechaber says that the son's not mechuyev to go collecting, that means he's not mechuyev to go collecting for himself. But he could buy his own lunch with his own money. He doesn't have to give his last penny to his father. But he could use the last penny for himself, and now that he doesn't have money for his father, he's mechuyev to go collecting for his father. Says the Chazoin Ish, Al kashe'en loy la'avi yesh lo l'di'ei la'atzmoi, ve'en yodam asegis lahach la'avi mishaloi, and the son does not have the ability to give the father from the son's money. And the father now has to go collecting. The son's mechuyev to go collecting for the father. Why? The mali lahavi goyz leislechu lemali lahavi loy ma'osav sheben ir min advin. Says the Chazoin Ish, it's poshut that if a child's mechuyev to go collecting for his father, if his father needs money and the father needs to go collecting, forget about it. The father is old and can't do it himself. Even the father could, but the father needs help. He wants some help. He says, "Yankee, I need help collecting. Please go to the local shul today and collect for me." Says the Chazoin Ish, you're mechuyev to. That's part of the mitzvah. The Shach doesn't say this. The Shach is mashma not like that. And the Chazoin Ish fears zois, v'divrei hashach temuim ma'od. The Shach is a temuah, says the Chazoin Ish. He doesn't understand why the Shach should hold a child's not mechuyev to go collecting for the father. Why is it different than any other shimush that the father needs that a child is mechuyev? Now perhaps the Shach held that there is a p'tur zaken lefichvaydoi. It doesn't pass for a child to go collecting. It's bezoyin. And that much the child is not mechuyev to do. But Akopon, the Chazoin Ish takes on with the pshitus that there is a chiyuv for a child to put himself out even in a matzav of bezoyin. Even the Shach that says the child is not mechuyev to go collecting, but the Shach does say that a child is mechuyev to give as much money as he could, up to the point that the child cannot, would have to go collecting. That means if the child has enough money for 2 meals, the child has to give one for himself and one for his father. He's not mechuyev to go collecting for the father, but up to the last penny, the child's mechuyev to give for a father. Bosh Deit Klor in the Shach, even the Shach agrees that there's no Shiur of Chaimish. A person's mechuyev to give his last penny for his father, up to the point that they have to go collecting. So steht klar in the Poiskim, the Chazoin Ish, and even the Shach that's Meiko by Zokim Lefichvoide Yavshim, but he's masking that a child's mechuyev to give up his last dollar for his father. There's no p'tur of Chaimish by Kibud. There's a Gemara in Meseches Yevamis. The Gemara brings a Maisa. Hahi da Osel Kamid Rav Nachman. There was a lady that came before Rav Nachman. She was married for a bunch of years and didn't have any children. And she wanted to get divorced, to get remarried and have a child. Omar Loi said to Loi Mifkarta, you're not mechuyev, you don't have a mitzvah puravu. Omar Loi, she said to him, Loi boy hachitza, does this lady not need chutra liyada, a stick for her hand? She's going to need a cane when she gets older. Umar l'kvura, and the shovel for her kvura, for burial. She said, I need a child, forget about the mitzvah. When I get old, who's going to hold my hand? Who's going to be my cane when I walk in the street? Loi be'ina chutra liyada. Rabbi says, "State in the Gemara klar. This is the chiv of the child." That was posh to the Gemara. The chutra liyada, that's the ben, that's the child. State in the Chazal and in the Poiskim that the mitzvah of Kibud Av is mechayiv a person to be able to give everything that he could possibly do for a parent, that he could put himself out. The only thing that he's not mechuyev to do is hoitzois, the expenses. Now, somebody asked a good question. What about if he's going to take a father or mother into his home and he's going to be busy throughout the day, he's going to lose his job? So that Rabbi Yashiv has a truth about. Rabbi Yashiv said, you're not mechuyev to lose your job. Even though it says in Halach, in Shulchan Aruch, that a person's mechuyev to be mevato memalachtoi. Das steht in Shulchan Aruch. You're mechuyev to be mevato memalachtoi, to be able to take care of your parents. So Rabbi Yashiv says, mevato memalachtoi means temporarily. You could miss a day of work, even if you're getting paid by the hours. You're going to miss a day of work, that's money lost. That you're mechuyev to do. but that's temporary. But if somebody's going to lose his long-term parnasim, that Rabbi Yashav said that's Bechlal Kibud Av Mishal Ben. That's already Nichlal Mishal Ben. That's not called Sam Bitul Malacha Mishal Ben. That a child is not mechuyev to do. The poskim say similarly, if taking a parent into the home will cause a big strain on Shalom Bayis, if the spouse is very strongly opposed to it, the poskim say, of course, you should try to encourage and give a chizuk, the chashivas, the schus of the mitzvah, kibud av v'eim. But ultimately, if the spouse is opposed to it and it will cause a big strain on the shalom bayis, then that's very likely that's also considered mishal ben. A child's not mechuyev to lose his marriage or strain the shalom bayis for the sake of kibud av. But under normal circumstances, as far as a child putting himself out to be metapel with the father, with the mother, the mitzvah, this is the chiv, this is the mitzvah, this is the haftochas hatoy l'man yarichon yomecha.
For the husband, not for the wife. The wife's not so.
So it's very important to mention that there's a very big difference whether it's the man that wants to bring his parents in or it's the wife. Because we all know the halach in Shulchan Aruch that an isha nesua is petura from kibud av v'eim. She's not mechuyev in kibud av v'eim as long as she's married, and the kibud av v'eim would shter the baal. So versteht sich, if she's able to do kibud av v'eim and the baal's happy with it and he's masking to it, the vada she should do whatever she could do. But l'maisa me'ika din she's petura, and therefore this whole shmuz would be very different in the case when the wife wants to bring her parents into the house and the husband is misnagid. So in that case, there is no real genuine chiyuv on the isha of kibud av v'eim, and that would be a different shmuz. So that's a shiloh about it, but Lamaisa, I'm saying bringing a parent into the home, pashas, that's going to be going to definitely take away from the husband. So if the husband would not be maskim, and she wants to do it, but the husband's not maskim, of course, the first thing to do would be to try to encourage him about the schus of the mitzvah and chayvod and bechvayt chamav and the ganze shmuz. But Lamaisa, the bottom line is me'ika din she is petur from kibud av v'eim, and therefore she wouldn't be able to have that same chiyuv as the man would. I just want to be Masayim that the whole shaila of their shir of a choimish negeh to kibud av v'eim is not really accurate, because the shir of choimish is for one single mitzvah. A person has a mitzvah luv esrig, one time take luv esrig shir choimish. So if there was one single kibud av that you're handling, if it's a shir choimish or not, then maybe there's a shmuz. Is it more than a choimish, less than a choimish? Is there a shir of a choimish by kibud av or not? But taking a parent into the home long term is not a one-time mitzvah. It might be a one-time decision, but it's not a one-time mitzvah. It's a ständige mitzvah, it's a continuous mitzvah, yoimim v'layla. It's mamish, a continuous mitzvah, day in, day out, every minute that you're being metapel is another mitzvah. So of course the whole shir of choimish is irrelevant. You're talking about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of mitzvahs of kibud av b'meshach the zman that the parent is there. So that would be a different shiloh.
What you have left, it's not going to take up all your money.
Right, but the choimish is only for one mitzvah. So over here,
He starts with $1,000, he's going to get $200. Now he's got $800, so you put a choimish of that. Doesn't mean you put all your money. What is a choimish what you have left?
that's true. It's a choimish of what you have left. But if you think about all the time, so in other words, right now, if you're thinking, is the tsar or the tipul or the aggravation, whatever you want to call it, of taking in the parent is worth a choimish to me. It's worth more than a choimish in the chasav. You're thinking about not for today. Today,
100 times,
but
you're not going to get to most of your money. You're only going to get to me of your money.
No.
What you have left each time.
Is Rai Sidvei Rabbi that's it's a choimish of the choimish of the choimish of the choimish. It's going to keep shrinking. But
eventually, you should make yourself become a person. Think about it.
right. But for each mitzvah, you have the shir choimish. For each mitzvah, you have a shir choimish. So each time you do the mitzvah kibud av, think about it. Is this mitzvah right now worth the choimish to me? Of course, each time, each day, each people.
If the share of Chaim Mishnah is because
And one last machshava. There's a famous Ran in Mesaches Yuma. The Ran says that if you have a choyle on Shabbos that needs basar, he needs basar, and he's a choyle sheish b'sakonim, and you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos for him. So the halacha is you're allowed to shecht on Shabbos l'tzorich the choyle. And the Ran asks the kasha, why are you allowed to shecht on Shabbos? Why don't you take basar nevela? We know that there's iklal hakal tchila. Nevela is a lav, and shechita b'Shabbos is chayve skila. So the avera of nevela is a iser kal klapid iser Shabbos. So why shecht on Shabbos l'tzorich the choyle? Why not give him nevela and you don't have to do shechita b'Shabbos? And the Ran says a moedik yisoid. It's true that if you match the shechita b'Shabbos to the iser of achilas nevela one time, 1 against 1, the nevela is kal. But if the choyle has to eat a lot, and he's going to be eating multiple tezeisim of nevela, versus 1 shechita, says the Ran, multiple averis of a smaller avera is more chomer than 1 avera chamura 1 time. So it's better to give the choyle 1 time as shechta b'Shabbos, 1 time avera, versus giving the choyle again and again avela. So alachas kama v'kama. If this is by averis, so by mitzvahs, batan, mida toiva meruba. So if somebody thinks about how many mitzvahs he has the opportunity to be makayim by taking a parent into his house, a mitzvah, nocha mitzvah every single day, yom of alayla, it's a tremendous cheshbon. It comes out to cheshbon gadol. So that's definitely something to think about before you make such a decision. Yashar koyach.